Salman Shah. He is a senior software engineer at Smartsheet, and he is someone who is passionate about technology and someone who wants to leave a lasting impact in people's lives. And today, he's going to do that by sharing his knowledge about Encore, Go Go SDK for that simplifies working with the cloud and deploying to the cloud. So please welcome Salman.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so the way I've sort of done this talk, I think, is we're going to do this in two parts. The first part's going to be just by the end of the first part. Ideally, I'd like everyone in the room to hopefully be set up. I just want to ask very quickly, does everyone have laptops? Do some people have laptops? So the way I am planning to do it is, if you want, you can follow along. I will be doing everything in front of you, so you can choose to code, you can choose not to code. That works either way. The idea is to sort of just give you a demo. The first part's going to be, you'll probably not need your laptop, at least if you want to do it, for the first 45 minutes. Last 15 minutes, we'll do a bit of setup so that we are set up for if anyone wants to do the coding along in the second part. That's what we'll do. So yeah, that's how this is going to be. Just want to get started. So divided the talk, the first part, into just multiple chapters. So who am I, right? Let's maybe start with that. I think, as Anna mentioned, I'm a senior engineer at Smartsheet. I'm going to be speaking about Smartsheet. I currently live in London, but I am originally from Mumbai, India, and recently started becoming a gym freak and more of a swimmer, which is very interesting. That's just a link to my LinkedIn. Going to speak a minute about Smartsheet. So Smartsheet's where I work. Very graceful of them to give me an opportunity to come speak here without any time off, which is nice. But yeah, our engineering teams are based across US, UK, and Australia. We are predominantly remote. There is an office, but engineering typically doesn't go there. All of us just do remote, which is nice. About the product, so it's a project management software. And what we do is we're a B2B business with customers across the world who use our SaaS software to manage projects in their different use cases. We have about 30 plus services in Go. There's about 5 to 10 in Australia and the remaining here in the UK. Go is something we've very recently started. So I've been here for about a year and a half. I think we've been doing Go for about 2.5, 3 years. So Smartsheet was majorly a Java shop. A lot of our older services are still in Java. The newer ones either are in Kotlin or in Go, depending on both team. But here in the UK, most teams end up using Go. I'm just going to give a small example of how we used Go. So Smartsheet's sort of like your Excel sheet, but a lot of capabilities built on top of that. Now, we've had a interesting problem which we've been solving and which we've sort of recently finished. We had a very large database which had a table called the history, right? So anytime you update a row in any of your sheets, you end up storing the history for that, not just row, any cell that you update in your sheet, right? Now what happened was, over the years, this historical data started accumulating. And we ended up in a state where for our grid is what we refer to as a sheet. So for our grid, so we start initially, the way typically everyone works is you have a monolith, you have a database, then you start sharding your database. Then even when you shard your database, then it gets very large. So we noticed a very common pattern across all our shards. 80% of the data was still basically just historical data, right? So data which is not as frequently used, but it's still in your hot tier storage. So over the last year and a half, we've been using Go along with AWS S3 to come to a state where we are returning history data. We're still serving history data, but we have a more async event-based service, which now returns historical data back to customers. And I think the key part there was us trying to move all of that data. So you want to be very careful, especially when it comes to customer data. And I think Go was very instrumental in us trying to solve that business problem. So that's one of the things that we did. I think I don't have an exact number in terms of petabytes, but it was about 20 to 30 petabytes in one region. We operate in multiple regions. So that's a bit about Smartsheet and some of the work that we do. We'll come to Encore now. So I really like this diagram, and I've actually picked it up from their README. So Encore is a separate company which sort of operates in open source software. There's two parts to Encore. One is what you see in the platform. We look a bit at the platform today, just in terms of features, but this is not open source. Then there's the framework and the CLI, which is what we will be working with today. I think I started working with Encore very recently, and I really liked a lot of things that it provides. I'm going to be speaking a bit about that in the next slides. I think the key thing that we want, hopefully, all of you take from this talk today is to just sort of give you the confidence to try it out on your own and then see if that's something that would work for you in production. So that's majorly about it. I think coming back to the diagram, I think the only thing that I would say is if you look at the top right corner, you can see GCP and AWS. I think Encore Encore has this capability where you need not, when we speak about the Encore platform, you need not host your services on the platform. You can continue in sort of syncing with your AWS account or your GCP account, and just use the framework and the CLI for your needs locally, and then deploy to the cloud as you do as of today as well. I've added just a small disclaimer there that I don't work for the Encore team. Yeah, let's move on. All right. So this is what we will be looking to sort of build today. I have a more more elaborate diagram at the start of the next session. So the idea is we're going to be building an API service. We're going to be having a queue which takes in some data from that service. And then we are going to be having another service which is writing to a database. So the idea over here today is, and this is about 90% of most of what engineering typically looks like. You have some API service which reads, which queries some data. It puts it in a queue. You then have a publisher, subscriber, and then you have a subscriber reading, and sometimes you're putting it in a database for later use, right? So I think the takeaway from here is to have something very simple, which, but also something very useful, which people can then have the confidence to go and see if that's something you want to use for your use case. You'll hopefully get that confidence. I think this is what we want to sort of talk about today. And I have some follow-up questions. But there's primarily three things we are looking to solve using Encore. One, and I'll probably sort of speak on my experience as well over the past year and a half. Three things that we're typically trying to solve: DevOps overhead, development speed, and infrastructure complexity, right? So over the past year, I told you guys about how I was looking to solve the history problem. One of the key problems, especially when you're working with the cloud, is a couple of things, right? So one, whenever, let's say you're writing your application code, ideally what you want to focus on as a developer is trying to solve the problem. So in our case, for example, what we were looking to solve primarily is, can I just get my history out of my database, put it into S3, and just read and have a single API which just reads it and returns it. and ideally, you would take maybe a week or two to just write that amount of code. I think the problem that we ran into, and I'm sure a lot of people do as well, is one, you end up, first, when you're working on the cloud, there is a certain learning curve with understanding different things in the cloud. Two, you end up writing a lot of Terraform, which is what we did as well, which basically allows you to sort of provision up tasks. So we ended up using ECS tasks. Some people use Kubernetes and EKS. But as a developer, you are spending a lot of time and engineering effort into things which hopefully can be solved otherwise. And then I think the third one is there's a lot of boilerplate stuff which ends up not just in infrastructure, but even in your application, which you can hopefully avoid. Writing the same handler, writing the same HTTP client, writing a router, all of these things which you don't typically, you end up just copy pasting from other places. So a lot of this boilerplate stuff is what takes time, takes more code reviews, engineering time put in. And that's hopefully what we're trying to sort of make it easier for developers to do. OK, so I think we've spent about 10 minutes on just me speaking. So I think I'm going to open the room a bit and maybe just talk to people. We're going to take maybe another 5-10 minutes. There's a few questions. Hopefully, people can just answer. I think maybe this is just very straightforward. So how many of you have been working with Go for, let's say, less than 3 years and then more than 3 years? Let's do less than 3 years. Anybody? OK. And what about more than 3 years? OK. That's nice. So we sort of got a mixed room of people with some experience and people with more recent experience. Maybe if anyone wants to speak up, if that's OK. I can just repeat what you just said. But what's the most, everyone who's developed and we've had a mixed room, what takes the most time whenever you're working with Go applications? So let's say you've got your API ready. Let's say you've written some code. Any DevOps tasks? Anybody? Hmm? So you're saying when you have to do performance analysis. Mm-hmm. OK. Anyone else? Anybody writing pipelines? Ops stuff, yeah?
Yeah, so I'm basically from the DevOps side.
OK.
I work mostly on the platform. So
OK.
I just came here to understand what the problems of developers usually might be.
OK.
And how I can cater them. So, I mean, I don't have much experience with Go. I usually write scripts just to speed up my processes, and that's pretty much what I do. In terms of the previous slide that you had, I was a bit curious to know why do you think like Terraform and all those things take time? They usually don't if you have them done properly, but interesting to hear your perspective on that, especially because the way we do it is we give the developers the ability in their own repositories, if they want to create any resources in AWS, they're able to do that, and they have the pipelines to do those as well. So, am I not loud enough?
Mike might not hear.
Sorry?
We're recording the session. If you don't have a microphone.
Yeah, then you can be recorded as well. And people in the future can also
Okay.
So I think maybe I'll just repeat it for you. So I think your question was, why do you think
why
DevOps is a
Is
bit
it-
of a task,
yeah.
right? So I think if you look at developers from the application side, again, this sort of depends based on company to company, culture to culture. But one common trend which you see across is most engineering teams, and especially most product engineering teams, the outcome that they're trying to achieve is to try to solve product problems, right? Bring more value for the customer, and so on and so forth. And while writing Terraform and learning and building Terraform is not something, it has a slight learning curve, but it does not let you achieve your main outcome or your main value that you're providing to the company. It still takes out time from your end to focus on the main problem that you're trying to solve, which is how do you sort of benefit the customer. Obviously, after you come to a certain scale, maybe that is something that you really want to focus on. But the key focus for most product engineering teams is how can I move fast? How can I deliver value? And that is what you will see even when you have conversations both with engineering leadership as well as product management, which is typically where product engineering teams come into. So yeah, that's how I see it. And
Yeah, I think
that's a perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a different perspective with
Yeah, of
every
course,
single
of course,
different
of course.
company. So
Yeah.
I was just interested to know like what your company has in terms of the experiences you've had. So thank you for sharing that.
Okay. I am just going to move to the next question. Anybody for that matter, any experience about managing infrastructure for your Go projects? Yeah?
Most of the time most of the time where I am, we're using like tools like Crossplane, or God, I can't remember the name of the other one.
That's okay. Names aren't important. But okay. So when you're using these tools, what is it that you find easy to do, and what is it that you find hard to do?
The way it's exposed to us is mostly just adding like a certain set of variables to a Helm chart, saying yes, no, kind of thing. The difficult part is when it's something that hasn't already been done, and then it's writing all the extra pieces to do that in some cases, which can be a bit of a pain, especially with Crossplane. So yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Last question. I think one of us did mention the expectations from the workshop, but maybe just anyone else, just maybe one more person. Anybody on what? Maybe you could just talk about what is it that you were looking to come here and understand in the workshop. Anybody? Yeah?
Hi, I've also recently started building something with Encore, so I guess I was just hoping to find someone else to, see how you found it and what your challenges have been and how you've overcome them as well. So I guess I'm, pretty early into that and maybe only been using it for about a month or something. So
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All right then. So yeah, let's maybe just talk about, understand what we're going to be doing today. So I think primarily these are the three things I want to sort of mainly speak to people about. We'll talk a bit about, sort of getting started. So we'll talk a bit about the setup, how you can just do a very simple hello world, how we'll try to see if we have time for a URL shortener. We'll try to deploy both of these to the cloud today. It will take us maybe about 5 minutes to do it, hopefully. And then session 2 will be the event-driven application. In terms of observability, want to touch a bit about the Encore platform. So this is the non-open source part, but just what the platform exposes when you sort of deploy anything over there. You can also get a similar local environment running similar to the platform on your local machine. So tracing, logging, metrics, that's what we're going to look. And then mainly on the platform, how do you deploy to Encore? How we look a bit on the dashboard. And there's a part called snippets, which I really like, which is basically, as I think everyone knows, there's a lot of copy pasting that we do when we are developing, right? I really like the snippets part because it just allows you to do that. These days, I mean, everyone uses Copilot or some sort of LLM, so you don't really need that as much. But I know, still use it to a certain extent. So this is what we're going to do for the first hour. Primarily these two things. I'm going to be doing it with you guys, whoever wants to, sort of do it along. Otherwise, everyone can just look, and I'll do it as well. We'll do a small hello world, which is just a simple API which just prints hello world. And then we'll try to run and deploy a URL shortener. This is where I think more than the logic, I just want to sort of show how easy it is. We'll get this from a template, so we're not really adding any code here, but the idea is to just show how easy it's to deploy and how easy it is for us to look at metrics, tracing, and so on. And then R2 is building this event-driven system, which you saw at the start of the session as well. Ideally, by the end of it, you should have 90 to 100% to at least build your own project and maybe deploy it. And very honestly, I think the quota limits for Encore, so there's no credit card sign up or anything of that sort. And the limits are fairly generous, at least for sort of hobby level projects. What are we not talking about today? So if you remember, I told you Encore also allows you to sort of connect with AWS and just deploy to AWS. We're not going to be talking about that. Kubernetes stuff, always a huge rabbit hole there. We've just kept it a bit out of scope. And then you can integrate some of your existing Terraform as well. Terraform does not completely go away when you use Encore as well. If you're provisioning, let's say, data stores or something of that sort. So that's still going to be there as well. All right then. So question for people. Who is Team Penguin here? Anybody on Linux? Okay, one person. Who's on Mac, Team Fruit? Okay, majority. And anyone on Windows? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. We are actually right on time. Okay. So let's start this. I just want to check who all are looking to follow along. Just keeping track. Okay. All right then. Let's get started. You can go to this tiny URL. You can scan the QR. I mean, I'll just redirect you to Encore docs. Okay. While we do that, I have that here. So just give me 1 second. I'll come to you. Anyone who's not connected to the Wi-Fi on your laptops, you can use this. It's a much faster Wi-Fi. So yeah, I will give you guys 30 seconds. Yeah, tell me, sorry. Can you tell your name?
My name is
Hassan,
Hassan.
okay. Yeah, just, yeah, please. The open Wi-Fi is a bit more slower, I guess. Very slow, because I was at a workshop yesterday and it was terrible. But yeah, you can use this. Is it okay if we take your question right at the end? I will have time for questions.
I haven't used it. I don't know what it is. So is it like a Golang framework or what is it?
It is. We will be doing just that right now.
Just that.
So
are we going to be building just using Encore, or is it going to be using basic Go?
Sort of a combination of basic Go and Encore. Encore still uses Go, so you will still be writing Go code.
Okay.
Yeah. All right then. So, going to get started. All right. So yeah, feel free to follow along. If you're not coding, that's okay as well. Just trying to show you what's happening. All right. So quick start page. This should take us 5 to 10 minutes, maybe a bit longer. Whatever OS that you're using, just go ahead with it. I've already done this, but let's open up terminal. I will just run it just so that I hope I am on the right Wi-Fi. I am. Oh, there's an upgrade. That's nice. All right, as simple as that. All right, so let's get started. Can someone at the back tell me if they're able to see the font? Just going to write this. Can you see it? Yeah, awesome. All right, so this is what you wrote. So Encore is available in 2 languages. There's TypeScript, there's Go. I have personally not used TypeScript, but I'm sure that's pretty nice as well. Yeah, so it gives you a bit of a few templates that you can sort of use. We are going to be, so in the first part, we're going to be talking about the hello world and the URL shortener. I'm going to be starting with the hello world. So we will name this GC UK hello world. And it's going to be downloading the template for us. There you go. And all right, I am going to be opening the code. Tell me the font. Is this okay? Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right. So it's fairly straightforward code, very honestly. There's just a function called world. It takes in, okay, before that, this is our URL path. It's a simple get API. You can see this over here as well. It takes in /hello/name. You can pass whatever name you want. So if I pass world, hello/world, it'll return hello world, hello Salman, and so on and so forth, right? And then there's a small response, which is basically just the message that gets returned. And that's pretty much it, if you think about it. If I were to write if I were to write something of this sort, I would take at least 3 files. You'll have a main.go, then you'll put it in, you'll have a handler. From the handler, again, this is all using standard library. From the handler, you will have some JSON structure which will read the, in this case, query param, URL param, and then you will marshal, unmarshal, do all of that, and then return back. Instead, we just have these 3 lines. Well, let's take this. So 6 lines, right? 7 lines. And that sort of gets us started. So the way you sort of do this is, well, let's do it in the terminal. What you do is just do an Encore run. A lot of your boilerplate stuff, which is what I mentioned. So a service is, or the API is running on localhost 4000. We will look at this for a minute. All right, so test your API. Yeah, I mean, people can go with this. All right, so this is the equivalent of what you use for Postman. All right, let's put this as go for con, right? And let me know if the font is okay. Yeah, hopefully it is. All right, so this is basically just Postman, very honestly. It just gives you all your APIs. Right now we just have one. It gives you a response, and there is tracing, which is not really very helpful for this, but will be when we do more things. But yeah, there's a small trace here, which tells you, and then the more times you call, it records all of it. This is all happening on my local machine. I have not done anything. You can store requests and stuff, which we're not interested in right now. There is something called as flow. It just tells you what all components you have. We will come back to this diagram in a bit. There's this snippets where there's a bunch of things which you can always look at. Service catalog just tells you all the services that are running right now. This is the name of the endpoints. And that's pretty much, at least for this, this is sort of the dashboard, right? And yeah, that's hello world. Any questions from anyone up until now?
The dashboard that you showed for Encore, is it like Encore-based dashboard?
So what do you mean by Encore-based dashboard?
I mean, is it the product Encore's
Yes,
dashboard? So,
yes.
and it's running locally. So say if I think you mentioned it has a pricing or something, right?
We'll come to it in a bit.
Okay.
All the questions you're asking are really relevant, just
Okay,
a
that's
bit,
fine.
10 minutes early. Yeah, we have about 20 minutes. Anyone else? Any questions? All right, let's go ahead then. So yeah, this is hello world for us. Like I said, all of you can just run it. It takes literally 2 commands and you're sort of set up. Let's move on and do. Okay. Before that, actually, just one more thing. This is just to show. All right. You can also run encore test dot slash dot dot, which basically just runs your test. I think this is the equivalent of the test command that we run right now. Go test minus v dot slash dot dot dot. Is the same thing. But testing is a bit more powerful. Well, maybe here not as much. But yeah, it's pretty much. One sec. All right. Yeah. So it's pretty much, if you just look at the code very quickly, it's your normal tests that you write in Go. Nothing out of the ordinary that's been done here. Okay. Let's move on to the, we have time, so Encore app create. Before this, anyone finding any issues following? People who are coding along, hopefully should be straightforward. Yeah. Okay. Let's do this. All right, so let's select Go, and then let's do URL shortener. So let's call it GCUK URL shortener. Just waiting. All right, awesome. So last time we ran Encore run, Encore test, and then this time we'll also do this. But before that, let's just do. So this time let's do, I mean, Encore run will again give the same thing, but well, let's look at it before we go ahead, right? So generate, done, yeah. All right, so we saw this, I think, so this is the get URL, and then we have like a shorten URL, which is a post URL. Here, let's say I add HTTPS, let's say url.com, for example, right? Or let's take a very large URL. Let's take this. Actually, we can remove the HTTPS part. I believe yes. So basically, you're running Postgres as well. Yeah.
So the question was, does it require Docker?
Yes. You do require the Docker engine running. Yeah, so this is your URL, and if I just do get, just put in the ID, that should give me back my original URL. It did take the dot, but okay. So yeah, this is I think a very simple operation. Let's look at the flow. And oh, actually, before we look at the flow, let's look at the service catalog, right? So we have 2 public endpoints, service, and this is a description that we've taken from there itself. There's a get URL, there's a post URL. You can view some traces. Let's look at the traces. So let's start with the shorten first. Both are querying the database. So in the trace, you can see there's a single Go routine. That's all fine. There are no API calls. There's one DB query. I can choose to sort of replay this as well. And that'll sort of just give me that. Yeah, that's all the information that I have right now. Yeah, so I think, and then you can similarly see it for the other requests as well. One's a get, one's a post. Again, very simple stuff. Let's do something else. So for people who don't have Docker set up, what we can do is just run this command. It's basically a git command. So all you need is git for this. Let's do git push encore. All right. So let's open, you might need an account for this. I'm going to show this and then I'll probably come in and then I can help people do the same thing as well. Let's open this up. All right. So you can see there's my build pipeline running. Sorry, hopefully you can see it at the back. All right, so there's the build pipeline running. There's a test pipeline running. I have not, also I have not written any code. We'll look at this as well, but nothing's been written for this. And then there's a provision infrastructure step, and then there's a deploy release step, right? This is what you would consider the equivalent of a staging environment. So we're not really running this in prod. It takes about a minute or two at times. So for the whole build to finish. But let's get it running. So apps compiled. Hopefully, image should be built. I hope everyone's at least been able to do a git push. Any issues in doing git push Encore? Okay. So yeah, this is my instance that's going to be created. Don't worry about this. Once it's created, it'll start streaming logs as well. And then yeah, just let's give it a minute. So while this happens, let's sort of go back and let's look at the code, right? Because we've done a lot of things, but what exactly has happened? So let's go here, right? So there's a few things that we need. The Encore app is just my link that I have generated over there. We'll come back to this. Go mod, go sum, I think everyone knows it's the same things. README, you don't really need. Let's go to url.go, right? And again, very straightforward code. You have a URL, it has an ID. ID is the shortened one. URL is the longer one. And then the shortened params, which is the URL. You have your post method, which we initially called. It sort of generates an ID. Again, you can choose to do this anyway. Error not equal to nil. If error is not nil, then you do an insert. This is primarily just a database operation. We're using Postgres here, but yeah, so insert into URL, very straightforward SQL code. And then you just return the URL so this is how you sort of return the JSON response back. So that's the insert part. Then there's the get part, which is you're just fetching the URL and the ID. This is how we pass URL parameters, if you remember. We're taking the ID in, we are querying the database original URL from URL, where ID is this, just takes the URL, returns it back. That's one part of it. The other part is the database part, right? So we need to initialize a new database. The database is called URL. Config, it says look in the migrations folder. Again, very straightforward SQL here as well. Create table, database URL, table URL. It has an ID, which is text, primary key, original URL text, not null. And yeah, and there's a test. Let's look at that as well. It takes in github.com/encore, shortens it, want URL. Basically, you shorten and then you get it again, and that's what the test is. And you just check what you sent initially. That's what you got. I mean, you can write more tests as well. Nothing stopping there. But that's all that is there, right? You implemented a get method. You implemented post method. You had some business logic. Ideally, you would not want to write all of this in a single file, and this would be a bit more spread out in production. But just to do something like this, it took us one file, probably another test file and a migration, and that's about it. Let's look at what we got, though. So build and test is successful. Provision infrastructure is successful. Deploy, you can see your deploy logs. You can see some application logs. This is what we were getting on our path. And you can see this. That's good enough. Look at flow, just two public URLs, the same thing that we had. And that is about it. Then there's some metrics over here. So this is interesting. We'll query this, and we'll sort of come back to this. Gives you insights. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else I want to talk about. Yeah, so you have your get request. Let's just do call. Oh, well, actually, let's go to post first. Yeah, let's give it, let's call it goforconuk.com. Yep. Gives me a short URL, just copying that. Let's do a get, pasting that, call an API, and there you go, right? So this is all running on Encore's cloud. There's some fair usages, so you can't really use everything here. Let's open metrics very quickly. I mean, don't think there's going to be anything. Probably I'll have to make multiple requests, or okay, I will check on this in a minute. But let's look at the traces. There we go. So there's one trace, one Go routine. There's a DB query that's run. That's mentioned over here. And we've got shorten, goforconuk.com. We've got an ID. And yeah. So that's pretty much what I sort of wanted to sort of cover. There's other things as well as part of the platform itself. There's a fair usage terms and agreement, but I think you get like about 10,000 requests or something of that sort. We can take a look at the number, and I'm happy to sort of tell people that. But I'm just trying to see if there's anything. This is just the README. Okay, yeah, I think I sort of covered most things that I sort of wanted to do. I can also give you guys the URL and you can try to hit it, but maybe I'll just come back, right? So for people who are doing this, were you able to get here? Anyone running into any issues? Well, let's say, who all are doing it? Or anyone who's done it? Yeah? Any issues pushing? No? All good? Okay. Cool then. I think that's about it for the first part. I'll just go back to my slide. And so yeah, this was our install. We did the hello world using database. We built the URL shortener. Yeah.
Yep. Great.
So we've covered using databases. There's absolutely zero reference in this project now. I realize we use the scaffolder from the Encore CLI. There's absolutely there's no reference to Postgres, Docker, containerization, whatever, in the project itself.
There's a link. Let me give that to you.
Sweet, because I'd like to know sort of how to make the leap from using the scaffolding sort of like starting project to actually defining this stuff ourselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can give you a link of, so, well, let me maybe take one step back, right? So I think I wasn't sure if we sort of covered that. Maybe we went a bit fast, but let's take a step back, right? So there's a lot of documentation on how you can sort of write database migrations. What we did was just get things running, and we needed that for our second part, which will start after the break. But there's documentation for how you can sort of write migrations, how you can write code for your database layer. So if you think about it, there's the API layer, there's the business layer, and there's the storage layer. There's documentation for each of these layers on the main website. Let me open that up so that while we're sort of talking about this. Encore.dev. So this is, this is Encore.dev is basically the website, and there's a lot of documentation on a lot of things. I think for today we will majorly be covering databases and PubSub. That's the second part. There's other things as well, which unfortunately I don't think we'll have the time for. So yeah, would highly recommend take a look at this. There's really good examples which have helped me write code. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question as well. Anyone else? Anything that we've sort of, yeah?
Hi. So I guess we've seen how we use the scaffolder to create a new application and create a new service. What's your typical process for, okay, you've added one service with the scaffolder, but when you're creating a new service, so I know they have like the AI generator that you have, a few tokens for free, but assuming you're not using that, what's your process for actually adding a new service? Do you just sort of copy everything, say in your URL, shorten a service, paste it, and then modify the names, or how do you spin up new services?
I mean, so when I initially started, what I used to do, very honestly, was take the Hello World project, which the first one which we did, and then start building things on top of it. There is a provision to use, and I think that's pretty much what I've done, because I've not yet deployed. I've sort of tried. I've deployed it to production, but not like production scale production, right? I just like hobby stuff. So I would say I think my process is still just getting an idea of what I want to build, then just writing code. There's a lot of LLM stuff that you can do. I do end up using Copilot a few times. So I've done multiple things, very honestly. There's no set thing, but I usually prefer, especially when I'm not familiar initially, not to use LLMs. And just try to code it, try to copy paste code and maybe change a few things, then sort of get an idea of, okay, this needs to be there, this needs to be there. You make a lot more mistakes in that approach, but then that helps you learn a lot more as well. And then when you're doing the generated code, if something's missing, you're able to spot it later. And I'm not saying you should not do the generated code. I just feel you should take some time and then move on to an LLM, and then you at least know if something goes wrong, what is going wrong. So that's my thought process.
Thanks. Cheers.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 4 minutes. Yeah.
We can take one more question. Yeah.
My question is more around testing, and I noticed that the tests, you're just calling the I think the name function, for example, in the Hello World. I'm kind of used to spinning up a full API server and like being able to call that. Can you achieve something similar, or do I even need to with Encore?
So let me maybe try to understand this question. I think what you're saying is, can you maybe elaborate a bit on the API server part?
Yes.
So let's take, for example, this. Let's say you have a URL shortener service. How would you test it?
So normally I would have some function that will return the URL that my API is running on, and then I would make a request to that.
Are you using some sort of mocking for that? Like the database interaction?
No.
Okay.
I literally spin up a database, and then part of the teardown is to then clear the database.
Okay. So sort of like an end-to-end test is what you would typically run.
Yes.
I've not run end-to-end tests using Encore. I do use end-to-end tests as well on my day-to-day work. I've not run end-to-end tests. Like I said, I've not gone to full-scale production. Usually when you go to full-scale production, you start doing those things as well. I'm not sure, very honestly. I would have to maybe check back. I'm sure there's something in the documentation, but I've not done it personally, so I also don't know. I will probably figure that answer out with you in the break. Yeah. 2 minutes. So hopefully you'll be the last question.
I'm not sure if you've already sort of mentioned that you didn't know, but just piggybacking off of the testing question, we use like tools like LocalStack to spin up like a copy of a service for AWS, like a Lambda or something, and then we'd do like black box testing by throwing data at it, seeing if the right thing comes out. You mentioned like earlier in the presentation about like dynamic loading. Is that? I just wanted to check. Are you talking about like?
No, I think that's a developer experience part. So typically, when you run Go applications, you typically do a Go build, and then you run the binary, or you can also do Go run main.go. But every time you make a change, you typically, even if you're doing Go run main.go, you exit from that and then start your application again. The dynamic loading I was referring to is you don't need to exit your application. You just keep typing. It's sort of like if, there was a time where I used to do Rails. Rails had a similar experience where you keep making changes, and then if something breaks, it comes up in your logs as well. So I think that's more from a developer experience perspective. You make some changes while you're coding. It sort of dynamically loads your binary.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right then, I
Okay.
think we can wrap up,
Yeah.
and we'll see you guys hopefully in the second session.
Yeah, thank you so